For the last 23 years, I've used only Windows computers, and for the last 11 years, I've used only Android phones. But a few months ago, I swapped out my Dell laptop for a MacBook Pro 14. I swapped out my Huawei phone for an iPhone 13 Pro, and just to complete the Apple ecosystem, I also bought an iPad Pro 11, an iPad Mini 6, and some AirPods Pros. So I'm now, for the first time ever, well and truly integrated into the Apple ecosystem. So why did I make the switch, and do I regret it? Well, it's complicated. I'm going to focus more on switching from a Windows laptop to an Apple laptop in this video because I've already made a video on why I switched to iPhone after 11 years on Android. You can click on the pop-up banner above to watch that. But in terms of Windows laptops and MacBooks, there were some massive differences, far more than I thought there would be. First, I've got to preface, I love Windows, and that's why I stuck with them for so long. My first ever Windows computer ran Windows 98 23 years ago now, and it was the family computer. And I remember friends would come round to my house just to use the PC because back then it was rare for someone to have one, right? And I remember I'd have friends come over just to print off Grand Theft Auto 3 cheat codes for the PlayStation 2. I think this was around 2000, 2001. And ever since, I've been quite content using Windows computers and laptops. That was until Apple's M1 silicon chip came out around November 2020, and that changed everything. Normally every year, laptops get either slightly more powerful or slightly better battery life, one of the two, right? But Apple's M1 chip really was revolutionary in that the new MacBook Air M1 laptops not only saw a huge power improvement, but they also saw a massive improvement in battery life. The CPU was something like 3.5 times faster than the previous chip they were using, and the battery life lasted up to 18 hours, which was amazing at the time and still is incredible. And the base model was selling for just $1,000. It blew every other Windows laptop out of the water, and it could even compete with Windows laptops that were even twice the price. And that right there was the reason why I switched all my devices to the Apple ecosystem, because the silicon chip was, and still is, just so far ahead of the competition, at least in my opinion. I switched from a Dell XPS 13 laptop, which was an incredible laptop. I was using it for about 2 years and I genuinely have no complaints with it. And I ended up switching it for a MacBook Pro 14. And the first thing I noticed was the MacBook is just built so much better. The build quality is on another level. It's so well put together. And that's not to say that the Dell didn't have good build quality, but the MacBook was just something else. Saying that though, I kind of expected it. I mean, I bought the MacBook for about twice the price that I paid for the Dell laptop, and Apple's products are known for their superior build quality, so it wasn't really unexpected. The second thing I noticed was actually how powerful it was and the battery life. Like I mentioned earlier with the M1 silicon chip, the MacBook 14 Pro that I bought has the M1 Pro chip, and it's insanely fast. I mean, ridiculously fast. I can export videos in a fraction of the time that it took my Dell laptop to, and the battery life, that's a good 8 hours, meaning whenever I go to a coffee shop to work, I don't really need to bring my charger. However, I think the most noticeable difference was the display and speakers. They're just phenomenal. The display is by far the nicest display on any laptop, and I didn't think it was possible to get this good sound quality from a laptop. I remember I was watching Netflix in bed and I had the speakers on full volume, and I genuinely heard surround sound. I mean, the sound was coming out from the speakers in the laptop, but I also heard sound coming from all around me, and it was the weirdest thing, but that's how good these speakers are. Oh, and also I started another YouTube channel educating on NFTs and blockchain. I really do think that NFTs are going to be part of everyone's life sooner than we think, and over on that channel I explain exactly what NFTs are for complete beginners with absolutely no prior knowledge, and how NFTs will be used in the real world, because NFT technology is, in my opinion, one of the most important technological developments in the last decade, and they're only going to become more integrated into our everyday lives. I think eventually almost every company will have their own NFT projects, in the same way that in the early 2000s every company had to move online and have their own website, right? If a company didn't have a website in the early 2000s, they got left behind, and there are already massive multinationals creating their own NFT projects, companies like Nike, Adidas, Coca-Cola, Samsung, McDonald's, and Louis Vuitton have all created their own NFT projects, so I think it's really important to pay attention and listen to what's happening. Now is the time to become educated in the NFT space, hence why I created that YouTube channel. You can click on the pop-out banner above to check out that channel. The keyboard also is a nice step up from my Dell laptop, and every other laptop that I've used as well for that matter. There's just a satisfying click when you press each key. It's kind of hard to explain, but the Dell keyboard, although it was nice and I have no complaints with it, when switching to the MacBook keyboard, it was just noticeably more pleasant to type on. The security of the MacBook as well is a decent improvement because most of the world's computers run Microsoft Windows, therefore most attacks focus on PCs. This doesn't mean that Apple laptops are immune from viruses, right? But it's just less of a threat. So that peace of mind is nice. But overall, the single biggest improvement I've seen after switching from Windows to Apple was when I realized how powerful it is if all your devices are Apple. So like I said, I now use a MacBook, an iPhone, 2 iPads, and AirPods Pros, and the way that they all kind of work seamlessly together is amazing. Like, I'll open my AirPods case and I'll automatically, within seconds, connect with both my MacBook and iPhone, and if I play music from my MacBook, it will play it through the AirPods. But if I switch straight away to play music from my iPhone, the AirPods will kind of intuitively know, and it'll pause the music on my MacBook and play the music on the iPhone through the AirPods. It's really clever, and there's other things like I want to send a file from my phone to my MacBook and I can just airdrop it within seconds. It's not all good news though. There were some massive negatives when I moved over from Windows to Apple, and firstly, maybe the most obvious thing was the cost, right? I bought all my Apple devices within a few months of each other, and even with the base MacBook 14 Pro, all the devices cost me, I think, around $6,000, which is a lot of money to spend just on electronics. Secondly, now that I've invested so much into the Apple ecosystem, I do in some ways feel a bit trapped. With Windows and Android, we have choices, right? For example, the single most important factor for me when buying a phone is the battery life. It's got to have a good battery life, and if it doesn't, I won't buy it, right? But if I need a new phone and the next iPhone that comes out has abysmal battery life, I remember the iPhone 7 and a few others had awful battery life, then I'd kind of be forced to buy it because I'd be compelled to stay within the Apple ecosystem. I've had my MacBook 14 Pro for a few months now, and I'm still getting used to the Mac OS, and I'll be honest, I don't love it. I prefer Windows 11 OS. I just feel like the file management system is far better and just more intuitive. Like taking screenshots, minimizing all windows to get back to the desktop, and moving files and folders around on Mac OS is just that tiny bit more problematic, I feel. Another disadvantage to the MacBook Pro is how thick and heavy it is, especially compared to my Dell laptop. Now, I understand why, because they wanted to fit a bigger battery and make it more powerful, so I don't mind too much, but still it is a disadvantage. The notch too, I thought that it would bother me because I thought that it was ridiculous adding a notch to a laptop, and I still kind of do think it's ridiculous when other manufacturers have made their bezel super thin without the need to have any kind of notch. But actually, I barely even notice it. It's never, in the 3 or so months that I've been using this laptop, been a problem. And one thing that has been a problem recently though is I've been having the laptop crash on me every now and then. I didn't expect this, especially from a MacBook. I was always under the impression that MacBooks and Mac OS were relatively stable, but the last few days in particular, I've had to reset my laptop a few times because my screen just decided to freeze. But overall, I'm pretty happy with my switch from Windows to Apple. The overall kind of experience, especially because all my devices work seamlessly together, whereas before they didn't, has definitely improved, and my workflow and output is far more efficient now. A few months ago, I did actually make a video on why I switched to iPhone from Android after 11 years on Android. You can click on the card on the screen to watch that, because there were a few features that were absolute game changers when it came down to productivity that my Android phones never had. Alternatively, if you are procrastinating right now, I made a video on the 5 best productivity apps for 2022. Again, you can click on the card on the screen, and whichever video you choose, I'll see you over there.